We'll see if that fixes the problem. I'm Peter Hicks. I'm the Executive Director for NEMT. We'll be going over standards today. First off, I want to thank our sustaining sponsors that support NEMT as an organization. These organizations have contributed to us financially, help us with various functions and tasks that keep the lights on and make us able to do standard development, provide education, and host the conferences that you guys participate in. Today's topic is NEMT industry standards. We're going to take a look at the current status and the outlook of where we're going with these standards as they're being developed. As you know, NEMT is a standard developer, and we cover different types of standards across the industry. We'll start today by talking about those types of standards, which standards are currently in development and what their status is as they're being developed, and then how you can get involved and participate in developing standards. First up, let's talk about the two different types of standards that NEMT is responsible for. The first and probably most public-facing are the American National Standards. NEMT is an accredited standard developer through ANSI, and that has its own process. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And then NEMT standards. Those are standards that NEMT develops that have not gone through the ANSI process, but are in fact industry standards as developed by the organization and its stakeholders. As we discussed, NEMT is an accredited standard developer. Once a standard has gone through that process, it can get the ANSI seal and is recognized by that organization. The NEMT standards go through that lesser process and are just part of the industry stating that these are the standards that we wish to recognize. So what does that ANSI standard development process look like? First off, we have to notice ANSI that we're beginning to work on a particular standard. We send them a PINS notice, and they then publish that in their ANSI Standards Action publication and lets other stakeholders know that that standard is being developed so they can participate. Generally, because of the structure of NEMT and our advisory committees, we don't solicit for extra participation through that process, but we do have that opportunity. Next up, we have to participate as a transparent development process. That means that everything that we do, all the communications that go into developing a standard, has to be captured and then shared later with ANSI to ensure that we follow our own process and procedure, and then ensure that we have truly had stakeholder involvement in that process. Once we go through those steps, a standard has been crafted, we've noticed ANSI, we ask them to do a public notice that says we would like the industry stakeholders to participate in reviewing the draft standard. And then those public comments have been addressed. We then take the final document and send that along with all that supporting documentation. It's sent to ANSI so that they can ensure and validate that we followed the process that's been laid out. One of the steps in that process is also designated how often those standards will be reviewed, whether they're open continuously for update throughout its cycle, or if it's reviewed on a scheduled time frame. Regardless, any standard that's developed by NEMT through this process has an expiration. So from the date that it's formally adopted and approved by ANSI, it has 10 years to live. If we don't do anything to it, it can still be a standard, but it will no longer be an American national standard at the end of that 10 years if we have not renewed it, if we've not updated it, if we've not gotten you as the stakeholders to participate in making sure that it's still current and valid for the industry. Now, as far as NEMT standard development, really anything that NEMT creates and says is under development or is a standard is truly a NEMT standard. The board of directors does want to sign off on those things and say that these things are currently standards that we recognize within the industry, but it doesn't follow that same ANSI process. It doesn't have the checks and balances to make sure that it's had the same transparent process in being developed. Ultimately, the majority of the standards that NEMT creates will be American national standards to help support the industry and your work in providing service to the public. We're going to move into the actual standards that we're working on. As you know, you can make comments and ask questions, but I want to set some ground rules here. We're doing an overview in this particular session. You might have comments or inputs, and you're welcome to provide those. Feel free to use the info@nemtac.co email address as well if you want to capture something for posterity to give information towards the standard, but that's not really the focus of this particular webinar. This is a quick overview, a highlight of what's going on, and give you an idea of where you might want to participate if you have specific inputs in what's being developed. So those comments are welcome. We just don't want to get into specifics. Well, this should be a shall versus a should, etc. That's not the purpose of this particular webinar. So let's start with the general standards that affect the industry. The first standard and the first one that we've put forward for a public comment, you'll see here it says BSR NEMTAC 1001. The BSR is designating that it has gone out or has gone to ANSI. They've recognized it and they know that we are developing this standard. It's not formally adopted yet, but they recognize that we're working on it. Once this standard has been adopted, the 202X will be replaced with the year in which the standard is adopted. So ideally for this one, for example, it will become 1001-2024 for 2024 levels of service. Levels of service establishes a clear level of service across the industry. Believe it or not, as we've been working with transportation providers such as yourselves, we found that various levels of service have been applied to different names. In some instances, in most instances, we know that curb to curb means that you as a transportation provider is going to meet your passenger at the curb. In some locations, they were using that same terminology, curb to curb, but expecting the driver to get out of the vehicle, go up to the door, ring the doorbell or knock, and then escort the passenger out to the curb. That's clearly not curb to curb. However, regionally, locally, contractually, that was accepted in those given markets. So we've set some definitions around what those levels of service are. For the purposes of ANSI, we're going to go ahead and repeat the public comment period in this quarter of 2024. That way we can get a final look at that standard before it goes for final approval. So what's included in levels of service? These 6 here. We've got curb to curb service. We have curb to curb with assistance. We also have door to door, door through door, and hand to hand service. And then lastly, transfer service. Transfer service covers a combination of mobility device and stretcher transportation. But these items are all available. You can look on the website and see what's included in the text of the standard. Next up is 1002, modes of transportation. This recognizes the different types of transportation that's established within the industry, whether it's ambulatory, mobility device, or stretcher operations. This is a very simple standard, but it'll go out for public comment after the 1001. Next up is trip terminology. And yes, we did skip a number. There was some communication errors on the 1003, so you'll see another document go into that space later this year. Trip terminology allows for clarity and communication within the healthcare sector, making sure that all of the different elements of the trip itself are clear and meaning the same thing. In some places, trip means from point A to point B. In other places, trip means from point A to point B back to point A. And so all of the elements of a trip have been defined and categorized so that everybody's using the same language. You'll see this one go out as well for public comment, and there's a possibility that all 3 of these will go out simultaneously. Look for those on our social media and on the website for additional information. Next up is a new one. It's 1005 data exchange. This standard is being developed by the Technology Advisory Committee. Ironically, we are all capturing the same information, and the payers at the national level are all looking for the same information, but how it's being passed from provider through technology dispatch platform through the payer, even to the states, was a little bit off, and it was causing some inconsistency in how APIs were being developed and what specific information was being shared. So the various technology partners and stakeholders that are participating in technology advisory committee got together and created some different data sets and data fields that are specific to how information is going to be passed from one level to the next, so that there's consistency from as the data moves along. We'll look for that to go out to public comment in Q2 of 2024. Next up, also comes from Technology Advisory Committee. This is the standard for passenger verification in lieu of signatures. We learned during the COVID pandemic that there are various ways to ensure that the passenger that you're picking up is in fact the passenger you're supposed to pick up. And we have all recognized that signatures don't always validate that that is the individual. We've seen time and again where an individual will scribble on a piece of paper or on a tablet, and it's not legible. It doesn't truly identify who that person is. So this standard is meant to apply technology and data to validate that you have picked up Mrs. Smith, for example, at her residence, taken her to her appointment at the appropriate times, and set some parameters around what those items are that create that validation of who that passenger is. The standard is set up with a good, better, best option within the document. And then it does actually eliminate signatures as a verification of the passenger. We know that some contracts actually call for signatures, a wet signature on a piece of paper that's then turned over. But as we know, that's harder to validate. And we are looking for ways to help continue to push the industry into the 21st century. Some other upcoming general standards are NEMT policies and procedures. This will outline what policies we should have as transportation providers, give us some guidelines and some examples of things that can be included in or should be included in policies and procedures for an NEMT organization. The next one is NEMT vehicle inspections. This was brought to us by a third party. They specifically called out that we needed vehicle inspections for NEMT vehicles. And it will allow us to create vehicle inspection standard. Now, this one is a bit more complicated because it does cross over into many other areas that are covered by other standard developers. So we either have to work with those standard developers and ensure that ours is in line with theirs, or that we draw the line on that standard in a way that doesn't overlap with those other standard developers. Next up is organizational standards. As you know, NEMTAC isn't an accrediting body, and so the first one in the organizational standards is our accreditation standard. Now, what's different and unique about this is that it is a gold standard. It's not the baseline information that an organization needs, what every general organization needs. It is an organization that exceeds most of the industry standards already. One of the questions that we often get are whether or not my organization has to comply with an accreditation standard because my contract or my locality doesn't require this. Well, what's included in an accreditation standard is what it takes to become NEMTAC accredited, not what it takes to operate your business in your location. So this is already out in the public. You can download it from the website, but you're welcome to give comments. We'll be looking for this to go into Q2 of 2024 for public comment, or you can participate in the Accreditation Advisory Committee and have input on this as it continues to be refined and developed. Now, for most of the industry, 2002-202X NEMT provider standards will be the answer to the previous standard. What does it take to be an NEMT provider? Day after day, NEMTAC receives phone calls asking, what does it take for me to be a provider in this industry? Well, the first thing that happens is, well, what state are you in? Okay, well, if you're in X state or Y state, what county are you in? Here are the nuances that go with that. So to make this a little bit easier, we're going to be developing an NEMT provider standard that allows for a national baseline that lets all of the organizations reach uh, the same parity across the industry. Um, Ideally, this will be developed through Compliance and Regulatory Advisory Committee, and you'll be able to participate in the development of that if you choose to get on board there or during the public comment period when it goes out for that. There was just a question, would the presentation be available after? Yes. All of our webinars are recorded, and you'll be able to access that from our website. Usually takes a day or so for us to get it updated and then published out on the website. Other organizational standards that are going to be developed. These are on the roadmap, but we don't have a time frame yet. Broker standards. There are various types of brokers. We have digital brokers, we have traditional brokers, we have combinations, brokers and transportation providers. So looking for standards to be developed around what is an NEMT broker? Who is that? What should they be meeting? We know that other brokers have chosen to select or chosen to accredit and follow standards in adjacent industries. So ideally, we'd like to have a standard within the NEMT industry specifically for those brokers. Also, broker accreditation standards. Do we have brokers that exceed that baseline standard? That's one that we'd like to see developed. Let me pause here for a second, have a couple of other questions. I've already answered the first one. Will NEMTAC maintain standards state by state or county by county? No, the idea is to have an American national standard so it covers the entire industry across the country. So we'll be looking for those standards to be universal. Now, that doesn't mean that we're mandating those standards be adopted, but it does give us a baseline to share. So you as transportation providers can go ahead and share those with your payers and things like that, so that everyone, again, is working from the same dictionary, same language. So education, let's talk about a couple of baseline pieces of information. Clear this real quick because it's blocking my screen. Some facts to deal with all standards. We must have stakeholder input, and education is one that really gets a lot of people's attention because there are different organizations that are identifying standards within NEMT. They're adjacent to whether they're transit or transportation or taxi or limousine, but specific to NEMT education, we want everybody to participate in developing these standards. The other piece is NEMTAC as an organization, as a standards developer, we cannot sole source compliance with a standard. So we can't say ABC company is the only way that you can meet X standard. That kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do, which is to build an inclusive and industry-wide standard that everybody can participate in. So a good example, certified transport specialist is education that we offer that meets the standard that we're developing. But ideally, we'd like to see ABC Education Company be able to develop a course that meets or exceeds the standard that's been established and be able to offer that out to your drivers and operators so that they can become certified transport specialists, whether they come to NEMTAC and take our course or not. They're still meeting or obtaining education that meets or exceeds that standard. So our educational standards, we currently have the following that are in development. We have the certified transport specialist, which is the ambulatory driver training, and it includes all of the stuff that we all know that we need to have, whether it is customer service, fraud, waste, and abuse, HIPAA, cultural awareness. Those are all elements that are included in Certified Transport Specialist standard. Next up, the mobility device securement education. This talks about how to properly secure a passenger that uses a mobility device within a mobility device transport vehicle. That will also include the instructor courses and renewals that goes along with that. Same thing is true with the certified stretcher operator course or standard. That will help those of us that are doing stretcher transportation within the industry, allow us to have people that are trained and certified, able to instruct others across the country without getting into the ambulance level of service, the basic life support. That's a different field, and that's we want to make sure that we identify what our needs are for this industry. Now let's talk a little bit about standards implementation. The way that we implement these standards is by socializing these standards. Part of that is things like these webinars. We will continue to do them quarterly. That way the industry can see where we're at, what our time frame is for adoption, how people can participate. Those are all elements that can be part of what we're doing. Next up, we'll do targeted engagements. We're already working with various associations across the industry, across adjacent industries, healthcare, insurance, regulators, payers, all of those. We'll be talking with them, attending conferences, doing presentations about the standards that are being developed, and also encouraging them to give input as these standards are being crafted. Ideally, as these standards are crafted and adopted, folks will implement them and start seeing how they work. They're going to identify the bumps and bruises, the warts, the things that are difficult and need to be updated or may need to be included that were missed in the initial implementation. So the standards will be ongoing, and you'll be able to give input into revisions to the standard as they continue to grow and develop in the industry. The other thing that we're doing is developing statements of work so that you as an organization can look at those statements of work and have language from those draft copies to include in your contracts as they're being developed. You can encourage your payers to grab that language to include as well, but it gives us an opportunity to get that information out there. I do see a couple of questions, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. Now, what can you do to participate in the development of standards? Participate in an advisory committee or advisory boards, as we've called them in the past. That is the way where you can sit at the table, literally, as things are being edited, have input early on, and be able to voice your opinion and be heard as things go on. The other thing is we're developing a stakeholder advisory committee. This will be not just folks like yourselves, but other industry partners that will get to take another look and ensure that we've truly gotten a diverse look at the standards before they're fully implemented and get people's information included so that we develop the best standard that we can as we move forward. And then don't forget the public comment periods. Those are going to be widely socialized, social media, website, our NEMT Today magazine distribution. All of those will get the opportunity to get that information out to the public so that you can get involved. Let me circle back to this question. It's talking very specifically about motive care and doing training with them. It says they've completed the stretcher training course, yet motive care still requires their training. Will brokers start accepting this training in the near future? So I will tell you that motive care has recognized all of the classes that we offer, the certified transport specialist, the mobility device securement training, and the certified stretcher operator. It sounds like that's one that we'll have to take offline and see if we can't get the right people involved in that discussion, but that they should already be doing that. The only place where I could see some opportunity for some changes is that some of the classes such as fraud, waste, and abuse and HIPAA do require an annual training, and our certifications are for 2 years. So they may be requiring that annual repeat to come through their program. So those are just different elements that might be impacting that. Some other ways that you can participate in NEMTAC is through articles in the magazine. If you are a person that likes to write, please feel free to submit your articles for consideration to be included in the magazine. Take a look at the magazine. We are publishing or have published past editions on the NEMTtoday.com website. Also, these webinars, we used to do them quarterly where it was a topic for the quarter. We've moved this now to monthly. This month just happens to be standards. Next month, we're going to do certification and education. April, we're looking at NEMT insurance focused panel discussion with different insurance providers. And then they'll continue each month as we go forward. Also, you can participate at the Transform Conference. We'll be having the call for speakers go out here in the next week or so. Exhibitors are already signing up and attendance is open to the public now. So I've addressed questions and comments as they come in. Are there any other questions or comments that I can address? Give it a second here. Like I said, I've gone through and answered several questions as we've gone through here so far. Okay, not hearing any at this time. Go ahead and finish up. There's our contact information. You can easily reach us on the website, nemtac.co. Look for some major changes there. We have a new website that's being published as we speak, waiting for them to transition that. And then the nemttoday.com is where the magazine is. Oh, got a couple of questions in real quick. First question, on the instructor training that will be through NEMTAC for wheelchair securement. I'm not quite understanding that. Is there an instructor that will be through NEMTAC for wheelchair securement? We do have a mobility device securement instructor course that is available. One thing that the Certification Advisory Committee has agreed to is that if you're already certified as a CTAA pass wheelchair instructor, that you can take a reciprocity class for a discount and become a NEMTAC AMDS instructor as well. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me directly and we can work on getting you enrolled in that class. And then to the next question is, to add training courses, our brokers require a certified trainer, whether we have one or use theirs. Most certification programs are going to require that you have a certified instructor somewhere in your team or have access to one, specifically if it's something that involves skills. So if you're talking wheelchair, mobility device securement, or stretcher operations, you're going to want to verify that the individuals that are being certified can actually do those skills. There was some confusion with the certified stretcher operator course where people were taking the online element of the course, getting that completion and thinking that they were certified as a certified stretcher operator. And in fact, they weren't until you go through the final step of having an instructor verify your skills and capabilities. That's not a complete certification. So as those folks are renewing, there has been some frustration in that particular class because we're asking them to actually demonstrate their ability to operate a stretcher. And now they've been doing it for 2 years, so it should be very cut and dry for them to demonstrate those skills and go on. It's not very time demanding certification, but it is important that we see that you're able to raise and lower the stretcher properly, that you're able to transfer your passenger to and from the stretcher safely. Those are all elements that are important. Well, if there are no other questions, we will see you guys again next month. as we talk about certifications and education. Oh, we got another one. This question is, do you anticipate that brokers will accept these NEMTAC training courses to meet their credentials mandates? For example, will MotiveCare approve the CTS course in lieu of the PASS certification? I can tell you already that MotiveCare does recognize CTS as being equal to or greater than the PASS basic training. That's already allowed within CompliCore. It's already recognized. So I think that if you're having troubles there, feel free to reach out and we can have a chat. Do other brokers recognize it? I am not aware of other brokers that currently recognize CTS. I know that several states have included the language of our courses in their contracts without stating the course by name. So if you want to take that offline, we can get that information as to where you're at and whether or not your state is one that recognizes. What about the NEMTAC wheelchair training course in lieu of the wheelchair training certificate from CTAA? Again, that the AMDS course is recognized by MotiveCare. And next up, are you interested in getting suggestions of topics we would like to see covered in these Lunch and Learns? Absolutely. If you have a topic or a subject that you'd like to see in Lunch and Learns, please feel free to send those along. We do have a short list of topics for the rest of the year, but we're always open to suggestions. Ultimately, we'll end up with about 2 of these a month, except for September and December. So between, I'm looking over at my list, standards and accreditation webinars that'll be very specific going forward. Lunch and Learns will be industry-driven topics, things that you guys want to hear about. So feel free to send those over to me. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and end this one. Appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you so much. And oh, looks like we got one more. The list of topics will be found on the NEMT Today page, because that will be a page on the new website. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We will see you next month. Have a great week and be safe.